Hi, and welcome to this session about using the creative arts, specifically poetry, yes, poetry, as a tool in your organization's anti-hunger work. I appreciate you tuning in, and I'm grateful to Lady Di Beverly, a well-loved poet, for joining me today. You'll be hearing one of her poems in a few minutes. So, why is this session relevant to you? Well, I'd say that if you're with a food bank, a soup kitchen, a CSA, a youth focused or senior focused or campus focused anti-hunger group, if you're with a food justice or food gleaning or food waste group, if you're a community or faith-based or inner city or suburban or rural centered anti-hunger group, if you're with any of those kind of groups, this session will be useful to you, especially if you're trying to find new and exciting ways to engage stakeholders, including those you serve, your donors, grant makers, decision makers, elected public officials, community leaders, academics, even movie stars, and the like. So here's why I think this session will be useful to you. We're finding that the arts, music, visual arts, dance, puppetry, photography, and the like, including poetry, can work alongside your story and alongside hunger statistics and trend lines to grab the attention of anyone who has a heart and a soul. And in the case of poetry, anyone who has ears and anyone who has an interest in preventing hunger. As I'll explain, we're finding that poetry can, in fact, be turned into food. I'm Hiram Larew. After a career in international food security work and as a longtime poet, I founded PoetryXHunger as a way to bring poets from around the world to fight against hunger. That was about 6 years ago or so. Today we have around 400 or so poets from near and far who have joined the Poetry X Hunger cause. Their poems are posted on the Poetry X Hunger website and are freely available to you to use. That Poetry X Hunger website is just www.poetryx, the letter X, hunger, and that's all one phrase, poetryxhunger.com. I'll dive a bit more into what's on the website and how it might be helpful to you in just a few minutes. But for now, let me cue up a poem that proves the point about the power of poetry to reach out and grab. This poem raises attention and it's raised support. Feed the Children recently used Poetry X Hunger poem by Canadian poet Josephine Larew, the poem's titled Enough, as the focus of a Feed the Children public service announcement. They've added music, of course, and photography to really increase the poem's remarkable call to action. So, yes, indeed, if words were simply enough, here comes the poem.
If words were enough, I would sate your hunger. I would build for you a well, ever filled with water clean. I would work alongside as you till the field. Watch hope emerge green from the brown earth. If words were enough, I would end our misery. Watch each child of yours grow strong and true. Teach them to read and to write and to sing, so that their voices be forgotten nevermore. If words were enough, I would help you bear your burden. bring healing to your wounds, end strife. See beyond the lines on a map, beyond color, and you would know you are my sister, my brother, my child. If words were enough.
So, poem incorporated into a public service announcement that I believe is amazing in its reach. If you'd like to watch the video again, just go to YouTube and search for Feed the Children If Words Were Enough. You'll be one of more than 136,000 folks who have viewed the video so far, which is a key point. Working with fine partners at Feed the Children and tapping into the talents, PoetryXHunger poets, we've been able to amplify from the hilltop the message of fighting childhood hunger. And hey, others have given their stamp of approval to this PSA. The video won 5 national Telly Awards. So that's an example of how one organization, a large organization, tapped into poetry for their messaging to donors and to the public at large. But hey, let's say your team isn't quite as large as Feed the Children. It's just as committed, but isn't quite as big. Are there ways you can use PoetryXHunger poems in your messages, your funding campaigns, your meetings, and your outreach efforts? Well, of course there are. All the poems on the website are freely available for use. We only ask that you acknowledge the authoring poet, and they are searchable. So if you want a poem on food waste, on childhood nutrition, on SNAP food stamps, on hunger overseas, you can pretty easily track down such poems on the website. All of the poems are, of course, presented as text. Many are also presented by the author in an audio or video file for playback. And very importantly, many of the poets are willing to join your meeting or session to read their poems and their work live or by Zoom. Are there poems in other languages available? There are a few PoetryXHunger poems in Spanish. We're working to try to increase the number. And there are poems by young poets, young poets. Again, we're working to up those numbers as well. The point is, we've tried to make it very easy for you as an anti-hunger advocate to find and use a poem that syncs with your mission. If you have any trouble tracking down a poem about topic X, just let me know at poetryxhunger@gmail.com and I'll be glad to work with you. So here's one more example of a poem presented as a video by another fine poet. This 1-minute poem titled Hunger Pain was written by Wazik Mohammed, a Pakistani-born poet living in Houston, Texas. Let me cue it up for us.
Hunger Pain. Hungry for the rain, hungry for the fall, hunger for all. As the drops fill me with hope, I breathe a sigh of relief. I spot green growth underneath. My rumbling stomach disagrees, so I imagine the fruits of my labor, fruits that will deceive. Hungry for the truth, hunger rises up, hunger and its pain. Titled Hunger Pain.
So that was Wazik Muhammad reading a very moving poem titled Hunger, Pain. So before we're joined by Lady Di Beverly to read her poem about food waste titled Pitch In, let me tease you with some ways you might want to tap into Poetry X Hunger poems. You could host a poet in residence at your organization who would visit you, learn about your group, and then write about it so that you'd have tailor-made, almost commissioned poems about your organization available to use. You could work with us to raise funds for your cause. Well, how would you do that? We could jointly host with you a fundraising poetry reading for your pantry or your farm, your organization. We found that we can usually raise between $1,000 and $2,000 during such events. For example, we raised enough for Roots for Life, a DC-based uh, community garden, to buy a refrigeration unit for their community garden. And Seed Programs International was able to set up several school gardens in Uganda with funds that Poetry X Hunger poets helped to raise. We've supported anti-hunger groups on the West Coast and around Maryland, on Long Island, and elsewhere. So, yes, we can turn poetry into food. Keep also in mind that Poetry X Hunger is able to make small grants. Poetry X Hunger can make small grants to support your work to fight hunger using poetry. We've worked with poetry groups and with anti-hunger groups in New Jersey and New York to provide such support. These grants are a great way to test out your poetry ideas for your programs, and the grant process is really pretty easy. So with that, let me wind down by introducing Lady Di Beverly, poetry leader in the greater Washington, D.C. area and well beyond. The poem she's going to read illustrates again the power of poetry to fight hunger, in this case, to fight food waste. Lady Di, thanks so much for sharing your poetry with us. The mic is yours.
Well, good evening, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Hiram. The poem is entitled Pitch In. People are hungry, yet people continue to waste food. Her meals were from partially eaten sandwiches thrown in public trash cans. She watched a child throw away a sandwich, one bite out of it. Getting sandwich from can immediately would be her evening meal. People are hungry, yet people continue to waste food. An apple, a pear, a peach, some cherries, some grapes, to help provide nutrition, to help curb appetite, praying to God above, never to give up ferocious fight. People are hungry, yet people continue to waste food. A project for many years helping my mother make sandwiches in our kitchen with family and friends, taking sandwiches to organizations like SOME so others may eat, brings on cheers, chants, yay, food is here. People are hungry, yet people continue to waste food. Standing on Main Avenue in freezing cold and snow, holding sign stating, help me feed my children, if only for one night. People are hungry, yet people continue to waste food. All across the world, people die from hunger and malnutrition. To ignore this plight would be a ridiculous, selfish shame. People are hungry, yet people continue to waste food. What can you do? What can I do? What can others do to end this international play? The answer is blowing in the wind, doing something we can all pitch in. People are hungry, yet people continue to waste food. A poem on the PoetryXHunger website.
Thank you, Lady Di. Again, just a wonderful illustration of the power of poetry to speak back to hunger. So, with all of that, hope that you will consider using poetry in your programming. Thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.